On the 3rd of February 1967, Ronald Ryan was executed by hanging less than 2 weeks before his 42nd birthday. His crime? Murdering a guard during a prison escape. Ryan's execution came after months of debate. Was he guilty of murder? And did he deserve to be executed for it? A tale of petty crime, prison, and politics. This is the story of Ronald Ryan, the last person executed in Australia. Ronald Ryan's life was touched by crime from almost the very beginning, when he stole a watch from a neighbour at just 11 years old. He was then made a ward of the state and sent to a Catholic boarding school to straighten him out. Though he did embrace some aspects of school life, the itch to be free overcame Ryan, and he escaped the school a few years later. He then made his way to New South Wales and took odd jobs to support his mother and siblings. At 23, Ryan returned to Victoria and seemed to seek a more conventional life. Within a few years of his return, he was married and had 3 daughters. Despite these positive personal milestones, mounting gambling debts caused Ryan to venture into a life of crime. He formed a gang that stole merchandise from various shops to pay off his debts, but the police eventually caught him. Ryan pleaded guilty to breaking and stealing offences and was sentenced to 8.5 years in prison for his crimes. Though Ryan was granted parole 3 years into his sentence, he soon violated it when he carried out safecrackings and armed robberies across Melbourne. This time, Ryan was given an 8-year sentence at Pentridge Jail. Just months into his term, Ryan learned that his wife wanted to divorce him. This propelled Ryan to make an escape plan to reunite with his wife and daughters and flee to Brazil to escape punishment. Unlike his boarding school breakout as a teenager, the consequences of this escape would be fatal. The 19th of December 1965 was as perfect a day for a prison break as Ronald Ryan and his accomplice Peter Walker could hope for. It was the day of the prison guard's Christmas party, and there would be fewer men on duty. Using a hook and some blankets tied together, they scaled the prison's walls in their bid for freedom. During their escape, Ryan and Walker held one guard hostage, armed themselves with a metal pipe and rifle, and used the prison chaplain as a human shield. By the time Ryan and Walker made it to the street outside, the alarm had well and truly been raised. Warder George Hodson heard the commotion and leapt into action. Hodson spotted Walker and attempted to overpower him while avoiding Walker's blows with the pipe. As other guards came onto the scene, Walker broke free of Hodson. Ryan raised his rifle. A shot rang out. Hodson was struck by a bullet and died in the street. After the shooting of Hodson, Ryan and Walker stole a car and drove on to freedom. Over 19 days, the two carried out several robberies. Walker also shot an associate of his after an alcohol-laden Christmas Eve. Ryan and Walker's time on the run ended when they were recaptured outside Sydney's Concord Hospital and were charged with murdering George Hodson and escaping from custody. Walker was also charged with the shooting death of his associate. Though the two men were convicted of similar crimes, only one of them would avoid the hangman's noose. Ryan and Walker's trial began in March 1966, with a courtroom divided on whether Ryan had fired the fatal shot that killed George Hodson. His lawyer argued that there was no way to prove that Ryan's bullet was responsible for Hodson's death. Hodson was 183 centimeters tall, and the bullet's path through his body showed that he had to have been shot by someone taller than Ryan, or from a higher vantage point. Ryan suggested that another prison guard had shot Hodson, hoping to hit the escaping prisoners. The Crown told the court that Hodson was in a crouched running position when he was shot by Ryan, which would account for the downward bullet trajectory. The Crown also stood by the credibility of its witnesses and claimed Ryan had verbally confessed to the shooting. Ryan denied ever making any kind of confession. After a 12-day trial, Ryan's escape accomplice Peter Walker was found guilty of manslaughter and sentenced to 12 years prison. Ronald Ryan, however, was found guilty of murdering George Hodson. The judge had no choice but to give Ryan the mandatory sentence for such a crime, death by hanging. Though the Victorian government had commuted all death sentences since 1951 and was expected to do so for Ryan once more, he was not so fortunate. Victoria Premier Henry Bolte felt that showing no mercy would bolster his tough on crime reputation, improving his chances of winning the upcoming election. Bolte was determined to see Ryan hang. Several of the jurors at Ryan's trial petitioned for his sentence to be commuted to life in prison. Other jurors admitted later that they would have found Ryan guilty of manslaughter had they known he would hang for murder. Public debate of the day was conflicted over Ryan's death sentence. Even if he were guilty of murder, many felt he did not deserve to hang for it. The shooting of Hodson was seen as a crime of the moment, lacking the heinousness to justify an execution response. Other far more violent crimes, such as Robert Tate's gruesome murder of an 82-year-old woman, resulted in death sentences being commuted to life in prison. Churches, lawyers, universities and the media all contested Ryan's death sentence, with the ABC even going silent for 2 minutes in protest. The pressure was on Bolte to commute Ryan's punishment, but Bolte would not be swayed. And though Ryan did receive some stays of execution, they ultimately weren't enough to save him. Before his hanging, Ryan smuggled a letter out of prison to his daughters, written on toilet paper. Ryan told his girls that he was not afraid to meet his end and credited them for the bravery he drew on. As he stepped towards the gallows at Pentridge Jail, Ryan's last words were to the hangman, telling him to make it quick. Ryan was hanged at 8 AM on the 3rd of February 1967. His supporters across the country, many of whom protested outside the jail, held a 3-minute silence at the time of the hanging. When asked about what he was doing when Ryan was executed, Premier Bolte said it was likely one of the 3 S's: a shit, a shave, or a shower. Despite the negative attention surrounding Ryan's execution, Henry Bolte's strategy worked. He would win the next Victorian state election less than 3 months later. Another election win would follow before Bolte resigned in 1972, replaced by his deputy, Rupert Dick Hamer. Hamer went on to abolish capital punishment in Victoria altogether in 1974. Though others around Australia would be given a death sentence after Ronald Ryan, their sentences were all commuted. By 1985, the death penalty was abolished across all Australian states and territories, and in 2010, the Australian federal government passed legislation to ensure it's never reintroduced. After his execution, Ryan was buried in an unmarked grave. Ryan's family were initially told that they would never be allowed to see where he was buried, as he was now the government's property. This directive was finally overturned in 2007, allowing Ryan's daughters to have his remains reburied alongside those of his ex-wife. Thank you for watching this video. If this is your first time finding my channel, then welcome. And if you've been here before, then welcome back. If you know someone that might get something out of this video as well, then please share it with them. And if you have any thoughts on this video or other video ideas you'd like to see from me in the future, then please leave them in the comments below. And if you haven't already, then please consider subscribing. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you for the next one.